Okay, so today we are going to talk about your back, and in particular your low back. So yesterday, you remember we did a little bit of mid-back work with that rotational exercise we did, and really talked about the importance of working through your mid-back instead of your low back, because we don't want to cause pain and things like that. And then also your mid-back has to help out your shoulders as well. So today we're going to focus on the low back, and one thing I want you to think about as we're doing this is your low back is supposed to be really stable. It's supposed to be almost like a tree trunk. It's not really supposed to have a whole lot of movement. It definitely can move. It has some capability of movement. It has to, but it's also supposed to be a stability point. So when we start getting really mobile through our low back, that's when pain can start to develop. That's when discomfort, instability. So if you've ever hurt yourself doing a squat or a deadlift, for example, it's usually because there's some sort of low back movement that occurs that's not supposed to. Your low back is really, engaging to protect your spine, keep your spine in a good position. It's really good at handling load. So because it's good at handling load, it's not really supposed to have that much movement. And it's supposed to be kind of that central grounding force. So today, as we go through these stretches, this is going to be more of a stretching component than anything. You're going to notice that we don't really do anything specifically with the low back, except for one or two of the exercises going to do a little bit, but we're going to target some areas around your low back as well. So we'll target the mid back, we'll target your hamstrings and your hips, and then we'll have one exercise that targets a specific muscle in your low back, and I'll explain the reasoning behind that as we go. A note about stretching and foam rolling. I know those are things that we've talked about in the past, especially if you're a returner. The importance of when to stretch, when to foam roll, and things of that nature. The biggest thing in the past, stretching and foam rolling have always been thought to decrease power and strength and not allow you to be as snappy off the blocks, things like that, if you're doing it right before a race. The biggest key I want you to keep in mind is whenever you stretch or foam roll, if you are heading into practice or you're heading into a dry land training session, you want to complete a dynamic warm-up after that stretching or foam rolling. If you do that, the stretching, the foam rolling does not have as much of a negative effect on your power, your strength, all of that good stuff. So you just have to follow it up with some sort of dynamic warm-up, getting the blood flowing. Any of our training prep segments will do, any of our phase prep segments will do that you'll see in training. So keep that in mind. It's not necessarily a bad thing to do before training. It's just not super helpful if you just do that and then try to hop into being explosive and elastic and everything like that. Foam rolling is great for helping with recovery. It helps you get some blood flowing, helps you move fluid around your body. It helps work out some kinks. Has some short-term range of motion effects that we can capitalize on if used properly. And same thing with stretching. Stretching is going to help for a very short amount of time, and then you actually just kind of tighten back up to your previous state if you don't move directly after. So if you stretch and you get a little bit longer of a muscle, or you're able to have a little bit more range of motion, but then you just kind of sit there and go about your day, you usually tighten back up in about a half an hour. So if you stretch, if you increase your range of motion, and then you do squats or hinges and things like that, or you get into the water and work on body positioning, that's where the hard wiring effect happens. And that's where you get that longer term effect of that change that you're looking for in terms of range of motion. So today, bringing it back to talking about our back, we're going to focus on areas around the back. We're going to focus on areas that affect the low back, but really only one of the stretches actually targets the low back. And again, we'll kind of go through that as we go. So the first exercise you're going to do, I want everybody participating at this point, I want your hands stacked under your shoulders, knees stacked under your hips, and your toes are engaged. Toes are engaged with the ground, so no flat toes. Toes are nice and tucked. Okay, you're going to start to notice we're in this position a good bit. The reason we get into this position often in training is this a really good foundational position. You can see from my shoulder to my hip is in a nice steady straight line. I'm not super arched, I'm not curled up. I'm really kind of in this nice steady position, this power position. I'm working on my hands stacked properly, my hips and my knees stacked properly. If you look at my lower body from the side angle, if you just flip me straight up, this almost looks like a squat, right? If you kind of flip me to a standing position, My back angle might be a little bit different, but overall, the lower body almost looks like a squat. So it's a good way to kind of work through these positions and focus on your low back. So for the first one, we're going to target your mid-back again, your thoracic spine, with what we call a cat-cow. If you've ever done yoga or anything like that, you'll recognize this movement. So all I want you to do is focus on pressing your shoulders up to the ceiling and tucking your chin. Pause at the top, and then I want you to drift to a slight arch and head looking up toward the ceiling. And you're just going to pause and then switch back, shoulders press up to the ceiling, nice big round, and then a very light arch. So we're working through the mid-back. I want you to complete 10 repetitions of this. Slow and steady, you're not tightening up your breath. You're not really trying to engage your core super heavily. You're just flowing through this, working your spine through a range of motion, getting those shoulders to part as you get up in this upper position, and then almost pinching those shoulder blades together as you come into the light arch. So we're going for 10 repetitions. Just keep going. Listen to me as you're completing the repetitions. So with that one, we're trying to really work your middle of your back, right? You can feel your shoulders starting to separate. Feel those shoulders coming back together, so the shoulders are getting involved. You're getting this, nice ebb and flow of the spine, working through a healthy range of motion, and you're working on breathing without tensing. All right, so I really want you to think about breathing without tension as you're doing that exercise. So go ahead and you're getting through your 10 repetitions. Once you're done 10 repetitions, you can rest. And if you get to the point where you start to feel a little pinch in your low back as you're doing that arch, you're going a little bit too far. So try to go just before you would feel any sort of pinch or anything like that, because we don't want to experience that. So that arch shouldn't be super deep to the point where you're causing discomfort in the low back, because that means you're just bypassing your mid-back for movement and you're transitioning that movement to your low back, which we want to avoid. Remember, we want that low back nice and strong, nice and stable to be able to handle all sorts of load. The next one you're going to do, sit down, widen your feet out to the side as far as you can. So for some of you, that might be right here. Some of you, it might be way farther than I can go. I want you to think about pressing your knees into the ground and lifting your chest. Okay, so we're lifting our chest up nice and tall. Toes are pointed up toward the ceiling. This is the only one that's going to target your low back. So your option one, if you want to start out, is just feet a little bit closer if you feel too much tension, if you feel your hips tightening up. And then option two, you start working your way out to the side. Chest is up nice and proud, so I don't want to see this position. Okay, and then all we're going to do is tilt to the one side. So your inside hand reaches to the foot, other hand reaches over top, and you keep pressing your knees down toward the ground. So don't let it start to lift up. Really press, hold for about 3 to 5 seconds, and then I want you to come back up to that tall position, chest up. Same thing, other side. This is the only one that's really going after your low back. And this one is really focusing on stretching what we call the QL. So I want you to do 5 repetitions on each side. Take about a 3 to 5 second pause, and then back up to the top. And you can just keep going as I'm talking here. So it's working this small muscle in your back called a QL. And basically that interacts between your spine and your hips. And it makes this little triangle position between your spine and your hips. When that muscle tightens up, it is almost impossible to sit down with any sort of comfort. It's almost impossible to stand back up with any sort of comfort. And if you try a flip turn when your QL is seized up, it does not feel good at all. Okay? It's a very small muscle, but the pain signal from it is very intense because it's protecting your spine. It's interacting with your spine and your hips. This muscle is very much affected by your day-to-day life. So, if you're sitting at class and you're kind of tilted to one side at class, you can have a shortening of your QL on one side. If you're driving your car and your one foot is reaching for the pedal while your other foot is kind of tucked back sitting on the ground, you could have tightening of the QL on one side. If you wear a wallet in your back pocket and you sit on that wallet, it lifts your hip to be higher than the other. That can cause a tightening of your QL on one side. So that's one of the muscles that we can really focus on stretching, It's something that I have to constantly be aware of. I always struggle with my QL, and it's something if I don't take care of, it'll seize up, and then you kind of look like grandpa or grandma kind of shuffling down the street because you're in so much pain, and everybody's wondering what's going on. You know, a lot of people, when their QL tightens up, they often think they slipped a disc or something in their spine. They think it's something super severe, and it's really just a tight muscle that has finally called it quits and said, hey, you got to stop doing what you're doing and fix your underlying movement. Okay, so that's called the QL stretch. That one's a great one to do just to kind of keep all that range of motion. It's also a nice side bend, but make sure you return to that nice chest up position, and also make sure when you're turning to the side, you're not rotating to face down, chest toward the knee. It's kind of shoulder stacked position with that one. Next one, go ahead and head down to your back. This one's always a fun one, especially with the guys. So I apologize in advance to the gents for this one, because generally gentlemen have some tight hamstrings. So all you're going to do is drive your knee into your chest, and I want you to straighten your leg as hard as you can by engaging your quads. Your toe is pointed to the wall above your head, and you're holding there for 3 seconds, back down, and straighten out. If you are unable to get to about a 90-degree position, you should be doing this one every day. So if you're kind of here when you straighten your leg, or you've got a bent knee position here at the top, this is one you should add in every day. So you're going to go 5 repetitions on each side, 3-second pause at the top. Really focus on keeping that bottom leg as straight as you can. It's okay if it has a slight knee bend, but we're trying to avoid too much knee bend there, trying to keep everything straight. So this one's targeting your hamstrings. Oh, I see some real tight hamstrings on the screen. One thing you want to keep in mind is as you straighten your leg up, your low back should not come off the ground. So just like that Y we did in the shoulder segment, you want to really focus on your low back positioning throughout these movements. So if you feel an arch forming, I want you to focus on pressing your low back into the ground as you complete that movement. All right, so based off what I'm seeing, this is a great one for some of you to add in every day until you can get up to that point where you're almost at a 90-degree angle with your leg with the ground. Making that right angle from floor to ceiling is a great goal to have, because if your hamstrings are tight, they can pull on your low back and cause pain and discomfort. So we want to avoid that whenever possible. So go ahead and finish out your 5 repetitions on each side, 3-second pause at the top. Last one we're going to do is really focusing on the hips, focusing a little bit on the glutes as well. Another one, if you've ever done yoga, you might be familiar with this one. So all I want you to do is start with your butt up in the air, trying to press your heels down to the ground, and then you're going to swing one foot in and try to rest your knee and your ankle on the ground. Okay, your hips should be relatively even in the back, so we shouldn't see any crazy opening this way. There shouldn't be one hip super far behind the other. It should be pretty even back here. This might be enough for you right here. This might be plenty of a stretch. You feel it in the outside of your hip, feel a little bit of tension there. If you want a little bit extra and you got the range of motion, you can go down to your elbows and hold, or you can straighten your arms and reach out overhead and hold. Okay, so this one's really working through the hip. I got your time. We're going to go 30 seconds on each side. We'll start the clock in 3, 2, 1. So just hold one side for me and just breathe nice and easy. So you shouldn't feel any sort of built up tension. If you are feeling tension, I want you to take some deep breaths. I want you to find a point. You could be all the way up here. That's fine if that's where you're feeling it. You're feeling a little bit of stretch. If you feel like you can go a little bit deeper, again, we don't want to force this. We just want to find the range that works for us. We got another 10 seconds here, and then we're going to switch sides, okay? So this is a great one to add. If you have any sort of knee pain or anything developing, change the angle of your foot. So if your foot, I'll do this way, if your foot is here, you can always drop it down a little bit more. All right, go ahead and come out of that stretch. Back up to the top, kind of walk out your ankles a little bit, pressing your ankles down to the ground. And then we're going to switch. Same thing on the other side, all right? We're gonna go for 30 seconds. So again, if you're feeling any sort of pain, you can change the angle of your knee and your foot to find what works for you, okay? And then we're just holding nice and steady here. Find that point. Arms could be down, arms could be straight out. Just breathing nice and steady. Your back is something just like your shoulders that you should try to take care of every day. It's one of those things, we got another 10 seconds here, just breathe. It's one of those things that it's easier to stay on top of it on a daily basis than it is to kind of make it up on the back end. Good, coming out of that position again. Walk the feet out just a little bit, and then you can relax. Okay? Back pain, we often try to stretch our low back when we have back pain without actually looking at the different areas that could be an effector. So if you have a tight middle of your back, that can pull on your low back. If your hips are tight, that can pull on your low back. If your hamstrings are tight, that can pull on the low back. So you have to work through all those different areas to figure out what the problem is or where the tight area is. So we like to hit a little bit of everything around that, and then we have that QL stretch as well. So that's something that you can add to your training. Again, just like yesterday, 2 to 3 rounds through, whatever you have time for. Again, daily doses is better than that long dose on the weekends.